Tonight on News 5 Live, a major decision is handed down in the Supreme Court on the Petrocaribe funds. The CJ ruled that over $1 billion were spent illegally and that the PM had violated the Constitution. A witness tells it all about sexual harassment by senior officers at the BDF. We'll have more on the Lederman case taking place in Utah, misappropriation of school funds at Excelsior High, and the latest murder victim is from Mahogany Street. He is killed as he stood on the street hanging out with a friend. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
Signing up for Smart's broadband.
Good evening. Welcome to News 5 Live for Friday, January 31st. I'm Jamie Rock. The much-anticipated ruling in respect of the Petrocaribe case brought by the opposition was delivered this morning by Chief Justice Kenneth Benjamin in the Supreme Court. The ruling found that over $1 billion were spent illegally and that the Prime Minister had violated the Constitution. In the unprecedented ruling, the CJ found that the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance was in breach of the Finance and Audit Reform Act when he did not get the required parliamentary approval for for the over $1 billion in expenditure. The CJ also ordered a constitutional amendment to correct the matter. For this to happen, the PM will need support from the opposition because he needs a yes from 22 House members. Here is Isani Caetano with a report.
The Supreme Court, in a case brought before Chief Justice Kenneth Benjamin, has ruled in favor of opposition leader John Briceño, declaring $1.5 billion in government expenditure as unconstitutional. The decision follows a claim that was filed on March 6, 2019, against Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Dean Barrow, challenging the legality of government spending of Petrocaribe funds, among other expenses.
We're very happy with the judgment, and I think it is time that the Prime Minister understand that the people's money is not his money, and that he needs to be able to, as a Minister of Finance, give account for every cent of the Belizean taxpayer that he spends.
The Finance and Audit Reform Act, revised edition 2011, expressly states that all revenues or other monies raised or received by Belize, not being revenues or other monies payable under the Belize Constitution or under any other law into some specific public fund established for that purpose, shall be paid into and form one consolidated revenue fund. It stands to reason, then, that the Petrocaribe funds from Venezuela ought to have been deposited into the Consolidated Revenue Fund, but that was not the case. Likewise, government did not go before the National Assembly to seek approval prior to spending these monies. Senior Counsel Eamon Courtney explains the court's decision.
What the Chief Justice found was that in relation to the first declaration, which was to establish that for 2012-2013, the approximately $100 million that was spent that the Auditor General had identified, which has never been approved by the National Assembly, is unconstitutional, so that the Minister of Finance, who is the Prime Minister, and the Financial Secretary, has spent $100 million without any parliamentary approval, and the court has now pronounced in favor of the party leader and the Honorable Julius Espat that that is unconstitutional. Secondly, in relation to the Petrocaribe, well, you know that there were 21 supplementary bills that were brought to cover expenditure of $1.4 billion that had been spent without parliamentary approval. The Chief Justice has found that all of those bills are unconstitutional and void for failing to comply with the Constitution. So we have approximately $1.5 billion that was spent unconstitutionally.
Financial Secretary Joseph Waite, who is also a defendant in the claim brought against government, views today's decision as a 50-50 outcome, despite the fact that the Chief Justice has ruled that over $1 billion from the public purse was spent contrary to the Constitution.
My understanding is that the judge, the Chief Justice, decided that certain elements he granted the claim, particularly the first one, which was that the supplementaries were null and void, but then on the other hand he gave the government time to fix it in the other parts of the claim. What we need to do is go back and first of all get the written judgment, better understand it, and see what the implications are.
Aside from voiding the 10-figure expenditure, CJ Benjamin also granted an injunction but postponed its consequence until after a 6-month period during which government is expected to amend the Constitution in order to address the issue retroactively.
We also asked for an injunction to restrain the Minister of Finance from continuing this unconstitutional and illegal practice. The Chief Justice has granted that injunction to restrain him, but has suspended the effect of that injunction for 6 months to give the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance an opportunity to amend the Constitution to correct all of this, so that they would have to propose an amendment to the Constitution to retroactively approve all of this $1.5 billion which has been spent by the government unconstitutionally.
Despite the 6-month deadline that has been put in place, Opposition leader John Briceño says that he wouldn't be shocked if government drags its foot in amending the law.
I would not be surprised if the 6 months would be up and then the Prime Minister does not make an attempt to amend the Constitution. So we will wait, we will see, but we are going to keep the Prime Minister's feet to the fire.
If he is to amend the Constitution, will he not invariably need your support?
Absolutely. But that is why I'm saying I need to sit down with our our parliamentarians to discuss it. But just as important, we have to see what the amendment is going to be before we can say yes. So on principle, if it is just to be able to fix what he has done illegally, then probably it is something that we would seriously consider. But we have to see what exactly he wants to amend and to ensure that it is only that and nothing else.
Court ruling notwithstanding, is there a political will, however, for the Barrow administration to amend the Constitution, given the fact that it is an election year and the timetable for other political activities may instead take priority?
Well, that is what the court has determined. I'm sure that the Minister of Finance and the Ministry of Finance will comply with the decision of the court.
Reporting for News 5, I am Isana Cayetano.
Following today's decision, Senior Counsel Eamon Courtney, who represents People's United Party, broke down Supreme Court ruling in layman's terms before likening government's expenditure of public funds to that of a small-time Panades operation. When asked if an appeal is expected, Courtney says he wouldn't be surprised, despite government's lawyer conceding in trial that the Finance and Audit Reform Act was flouted on numerous occasions.
To put it in plain language, the Chief Justice, and these are my words, found that the Prime Minister has been operating the government like a Panades shop. And the result of his judgment today is to tell him in no uncertain terms that he must comply with the Constitution, comply with the Finance and Audit Reform Act, and go to Parliament and get approval, giving full disclosure as to how he intends to spend the people's money, and that he should stop behaving unconstitutionally.
Is there any indication from the other side, or do you believe that they will seek an appeal?
I suspect if the government is to continue with its behavior, I would expect that they would appeal. The problem with having an appeal in these circumstances, for those of you who were here, will recall, and the Chief Justice repeated it, that their counsel conceded these unconstitutionalities, which the Chief Justice has found. So I think it would be a waste of the people's money if once again we are appealing something that they have conceded. We should not forget, Jules, that something must be radically wrong with a government who hires an expensive Queen's Counsel to come to Belize to stand up in court and concede a case. Why have they not gone to the National Assembly and corrected this if their own lawyer came to court and said that they were acting unconstitutionally? It's an utter and complete disgrace. As I say, they are behaving as if this is a Panades shop.
We know that this square with the penalties on the Finance and Audit Reform Act.
Let's deal with Mr. John Saldiva first, and then we'll see who is next. Batter up.
On the heels of an interview with Senior Counsel Eamon Courtney, the question of government's fiscal prudence was also put to Financial Secretary Joseph Waite. Here's how he responded.
The criticism is that you all were running the government's finances like one would a Panades shop. Your response?
I purchase Panades. We don't make Panades in the Ministry of Finance. And look, at no time has there been any suggestion or hint of misappropriation or misuse of the money, It's just how the money was authorized. But the government needs authorizations to keep from going from time to time. Urgent and unanticipated things come up, and we have to allocate for it.
FinSec, one of the big criticisms against you in this case is that under your watch, the government misplaced or misspent or made no accounting for $100 million. What's your response to that?
We didn't go to Parliament yet for the $100 million, but it's not misplaced, it's not misspent. When we go to Parliament in a few weeks' time, we'll detail it exactly. It wasn't misappropriated. It didn't go to Parliament before.
The PUP says that the ruling is a victory for the people of Belize, not for the People's United Party. A release states that the historic and hopefully precedent-setting move, the Supreme Court has found that a sitting Prime Minister violated the Constitution repeatedly and has legally bound him from continuing the illegal practice of spending the people's money and then, after the fact, asking approval from Parliament. The highest court in the land has told the Prime Minister that he broke the law and he must desist. The PUP also says that despite the ruling that the Prime Minister broke the law and that the spending of $1.5 billion without parliamentary approval was unconstitutional, the Chief Justice, in his wisdom, has given the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance 6 months to right his wrongs through an amendment of the Constitution. The release also says that the ruling must be seen as an end of an unlawful era. This UDP administration under Dean Barrow, it states, has been guilty of outrageous corruption and egregious fleecing of public coffers. The free-for-all, unaccounted-for spending of the Petrocaribe money is just one such instance. It adds that the ruling sends notice to the Prime Minister that he can no longer play free and loose with the people's money. The trial of Lederman in the U.S. District Court of Utah before Judge Jill Parrish recessed today and will resume on Monday morning. News 5 has been following very closely the developments leading up to the hearing, as well as the details of what is transpiring during the trial. Earlier today, we spoke via Skype with Nate Carlisle, a journalist for the Salt Lake Tribune. He has been covering the case extensively and shared with us details involving John Saldivar's alleged communications with Jacob Kingston, who is set to testify against Lederman. Those particulars were gleaned from a pre-trial hearing held on January 13th. Here's our interview with Carlisle.
The two sides have been arguing over evidence in the case, and some of that evidence includes text messages between Jacob Kingston and John Saldivar. And according to prosecutors who presented some of this evidence to the judge, Mr. Kingston is going to testify that the defendant, Lederman, was sending cash payments to John Saldivar, and that Mr. Kingston eventually took over those payments.
Okay. This came out in the case management conference, correct?
Yes. I mean, they call it a pre-trial hearing, but yes, that's accurate.
Okay, so give us now an idea of what has taken place over the past few days insofar as the trial getting underway.
Yes. I don't think there's been any discussion of Belize yet in the courtroom for the jury. They spent 3 days picking a jury. They had opening arguments on Thursday morning, and I don't recall Belize coming up. And then yesterday we had the trial's first witness, a woman from the U.S. state of Indiana, and she didn't have any knowledge about Belize. It wasn't even asked of her. So the jury has yet to hear anything about Belize.
Give us an overall picture of what is taking place insofar as the Lederman trial. I know that Jacob Kingston is one of perhaps several persons to take the stand to testify against him. But what are the attorneys saying on either side of this argument?
Well, remember, the trial isn't over whether anyone bribed Mr. Saldivar. The trial is over whether Lederman participated in a scheme to defraud the United States government from a biofuel tax credit. And so we're going to hear testimony about how this scheme was organized, about how money from the scheme was laundered to other countries, especially Turkey and Luxembourg. I think if Mr. Kingston does testify about any payments to John Saldivar, it's going to be in the context of how this scheme was organized. One of the elements is that Lederman had a number of contacts in the United States government, in local governments here, and even overseas, and that one of those may have been John Saldivar.
During our interview with Carlisle, we inquired what bearing, if any, an admission corroborated by evidence proving that Lederman did in fact pay Saldivar these significant sums of money would have on trial.
In the pre-trial hearing, were you privy to any documents or any information that would have either suggested or concreted the idea that there was in fact communication between either Lederman and John Saldivar or Jacob Kingston and John Saldivar? Did you see anything that would have substantiated any of these allegations?
Well, I mean, I think you've probably seen the court documents that have been made public in the United States. There's a reference to text messages between Jacob Kingston and John Saldivar. It doesn't say what the contents of those messages were. When I was in a pretrial hearing on January 13th, the prosecutors discussed this a little bit more and said that Jacob Kingston plans to testify about the cash payments that were being made. They didn't elaborate much beyond that, and I had forgotten about it until I looked at my notes this week. and saw that reference to John Saldivar. I mean, that's how much public corruption and money has been discussed in this case. Like, allegedly bribing a minister in Belize didn't even ring that many bells with me until I wrote it down, and then I saw it in my notes later.
Okay. Is there anything else of interest? I know that the court recessed today, and the hearing will resume sometime in next week, Monday or Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. But is there anything else of interest you can share with us insofar as new developments?
Well, the trial resumes Monday here in Salt Lake City. Jacob Kingston is expected to testify sometime in the coming week. We aren't sure what day yet. They have some other witnesses that they want to put on first. But we think we'll probably hear from Jacob Kingston by midweek. And we'll see if he actually says aloud in the courtroom that these payments were being made.
What weight or what gravity would this revelation have on the case? I know you're following it closely and you're not perhaps a legal mind in that sense, but what effect do you believe that this testimony would have on the overall trial against Lederman?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. Again, Lederman isn't specifically charged with bribing anybody. He's charged with conspiracy and money laundering counts. So I guess the extent to which anything about John Saldivar, to the extent to which anything about John Saldivar is important is only if the jury believes that it's an element of the conspiracy or helps prove a conspiracy.
A resident of Mahogany Street, Belize City, was shot and killed around 8:30 on Thursday night. Two men rode by Ebony Street where Kejan Tony Roches was hanging out with friends. One of them opened fire, targeting Roches and causing his immediate demise. Here's News 5's Dwayne Moody.
Another murder was recorded in Belize City on Thursday night, this time on Ebony Street, near its intersection with Magazine Road. Kejan Tony Roches was standing on the street side talking to one of his friends when two persons on a motorcycle approached. One of the men turned out to be a gunman who opened fire at Roches. The bullet-riddled zinc fence and bloodstains are telltale signs of the tragedy. By the time Roches was taken to the KHMH, he was pronounced dead.
Just stop crossing and yell a friend there, all the young man way by the other part shoot or whatever. They all ain't gonna school together from primary school to high school and together. So you just stop there and heal a friend or whatever, you just stop there and talk to me.
According to information gathered so far, the Mahogany Street resident was not associated with any gang and did not have run-ins with the law. He lives about 2 blocks from where he was murdered and lived a crime-free life. It came as a surprise to his friend because earlier that evening he had a conversation with Roches. He didn't seem bothered.
When I know Tony finally you go to primary school, Tony Ali pretty boy, so I always call I always clean off whenever I meeting clean off, stay clean. Always guy here cut. Always clean off anywhere. Anywhere I party there, Tony and right there. Always the part never into trouble. Just always make only one corner or take a little drink. Every day he pass and he'll make I came out of being hungry or something like that. And just before I left, if I got in a car, me and he talk. So when I hear about it, I'm shocking. I like Tony, not Tony. No, he.
At any point did he appear maybe worried or that like something wrong?
He always a smile, so I never know if he worried or if he sad. He never got a sad face. And that we meet Tony, he never got a sad face. Always a smile.
That intersection is not known to attract gun violence. One resident says that the shooting has the neighborhood stunned, and more so, they are still in disbelief that Roches was the target. A motive for the crime is unknown.
When I go up wrong here, it's kind of rough because then Bailey, up on this kind of Ebony magazine, the first man ever did wrong up on it, so close to this vicinity, Shooting usually happen more back more, or, on a different street than wrong here. But wrong in a calm, peaceful place every time, Gunshot, echo hard. Mama call me the fret. I don't want to know if something happened to she, I try to talk to him on the phone and he can't talk, so I tell him calm down and talk to me. And it hit close to home, man, because then if somebody get first time somebody get murdered wrong here, so close, like right across the street from this mechanic shop, that never happened like that. Never. Never. We always keep the peace in our neighborhood.
Dwayne Moody for News 5.
Coming up, a victim of sexual abuse at the BDF comes forward. We'll have her story. Tonight, we bring you more of our interview with the member of the civilian staff at the BDF. The victim has been working there for many years, but as you heard in our Thursday night's newscast, she doesn't feel safe at her workplace. She feels that the culture at the BDF has encouraged some members of the force to use their authority to sexually assault and harass women. The accuser fears that she will be victimized, that she will lose her job for speaking out about the injustices that she and other women experiences on a daily basis. So we have chosen to disclose her identity. Here's the story.
A brave woman, a member of the civilian staff, came forward to share some of the ugliness and sexual advances she and other women face every day on the job working at the BDF's Price Barracks. Many of these men in uniform use their authority to mete out abuse in different forms. Many of their victims are women. A sergeant of the BDF sexually harassed this woman, and because she rejected his advances, he makes it difficult to carry out her job. He went so far as to threaten her with harm.
I called my supervisor one side and I said, "Miss so and so." And I tell her about the little incidents, the harassment and the fresh words and touching. I tell her, I only could come up with that. I don't do this young man, but I said, but I know this every time I go next. He would reject me from getting certain stuff that I need to do my work. There was one point in time at that an incident with me and him before he threatened me and told me I can arrange something for you.
This woman says that because the perpetrators are not held accountable, she feels like their complaints are minimized and that the actions taken show that the BDF condones sexual assault on women. She says that in her case, the officer may be protected even beyond the walls of the Price Barracks.
They do want it's a cover up for them. That's the higher one they cover up for them.
So these perpetrators are protected within the BDF?
Yes, ma'am, they are protected. At the higher authority in our we have to understand that he has some relative that works with one of the minister. And we get to understand that he puts out a situation, that's been going on. He's the one always jeopardizing our job, telling us if it was him, if he has the authority, he would fire all of us civilians. Yes, he would get rid of all of us.
Because he can't get his way with you guys.
Because he can't get his way with us, because we always try to turn to our administrator. But most of the time, our administrator doesn't know half the things going on in our workplace, because they keep it a hush.
Do these soldiers have any respect for the administrator, for the staff, the civilian staff?
Nope. No, they don't. They don't respect the administrator. In other words, because of his link, okay, that's how they call it, his linkage with the person, some party below up in ministry, I guess. Nothing the administrator says, he goes by.
How comes it has gone unchecked for so long? You've made verbal reports, I would imagine, written reports, I would imagine.
Yes, but nobody does anything about it, because then if we don't let our administrator know, then that's how the media, if they keep it close. They don't do anything.
And you feared losing your job, so you don't...
Because they make you get that understandable. You make it understandable, because everything, they were quick to write you up.
This member of staff says that these men band together to not only cover up these incidents, but they also joke and talk about it as something acceptable and normal within the workplace. She says that several of them use their rank to intimidate and harass and assault as they want to.
So when I saw him with his promotion, I sat down and I thought, and I said, okay, because nothing came out of it. We never been called to the administrator's office. We never been called to the CO office. We never been called to the commandant's office. I said, all right, good. That's why they never pushed it, because he was to get his stripe. Now that he has his other stripe that he got, he feels like he has that power over me. All of us civilians, not only me.
Do you know if this particular individual, if there are allegations against him? Have you heard maybe from other staff members that this person...
Yes, a young lady talked to me about it also, but you see, this is the thing, they keep it hush.
So there are senior officers who are aware of what's happening and really turn a blind eye to it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because everybody has to hear about what's going on, because then they make it known, they go about and talk it.
As if it's something to celebrate.
Yeah.
The victim believes that penalties for these crimes within the BDF do not match the offenses. As a civilian staff member, she feels powerless, and even when she tried to seek help outside of the BDF, she was intimidated and silenced.
My this major, I told him that I would make it a civilian matter. I told him that. So he has his liar and he could just pay. He didn't have to say anything. He could pay his money. That's how he did it in front of me, my supervisor, and the sergeant major.
To intimidate you.
Yep.
You feel powerless.
We don't have no power. None.
Reporting for News 5, I'm Andrea Polanco.
Retired BDF Captain Dericia Castillo has started a petition to have the Human Rights Commission investigate these allegations within the BDF and other military agencies. Castillo has also gone on record in previous years to share the sexual assaults she experienced while at the BDF. We'll share our interview with Castillo on Monday. The head of the Belize Defense Force, Brigadier General Stephen Ortega, today braced for reporters who sought answers after allegations of despicable acts of sexual abuse against female recruits was first reported by News 5. The Ministry of National Security has launched an investigation into the allegations of extortion, maltreatment, sexual assault, and sexual advances at training company. One of the victims, who spoke to News 5 on Thursday, says that her life turned a living hell after she attempted to report the matter to her superiors, who turned their backs on her. These gross allegations come after years of speculations that senior officers at the BDF would protect one another. Ortega says he is not familiar with that culture within the BDF.
The Ministry sent out a press release that there's an ongoing investigation. So whenever that investigation is concluded, those who have found have been at fault will be disciplined.
Now, sir, what are the procedures if such allegation is made?
If you have a complaint, you pass it up through the chain of command, you do a written report, and that report formulates whatever disciplinary measures is made against the accused. And the accused, of course, gets a chance to defend himself, and we go from there, whatever the verdict is.
So one of the allegations is that there's a culture whereby senior officers here protect each other, to continue up the ranks.
I don't know how much you know about the military, but it's all about standards and discipline. And so that's the only culture I know about, standards and discipline. And so there will always be, like in society, some people who are rogue, who don't do what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. But for the most part, we go by that standard.
So how many complaints are we talking about? We've heard about 70 complaints against these senior officers.
I wouldn't know. I don't see the reports because at the end of the day, they will come to me. So the investigators, they go through whatever they need to do, and then they formulate what charges need to get filed, and afterwards those come to me.
One of the victims that we spoke to yesterday said that she went to the commandant with her complaints.
I'm the commander presently, and I haven't received any complaint as such.
You haven't spoken to any of the female recruits, anybody here about those allegations of sexual assault?
No.
So, sir, but as the commandant, shouldn't you know how many allegations have been made so far? This broke since Tuesday.
Yes, it broke since Tuesday, but I chose not to get involved in the investigation because I will, at the end of the day, try these cases. So that's like a judge being part of the investigation. How will that look?
A special investigative team has been assigned by the Ministry of National Security. The team is being led by Assistant Superintendent Charlotte Ramclam and includes Inspector Shaida Mackenzie, Josephine Garbett, and retired Commissioner of Police Gerald Westby, who is now the chairman of the Civilian Complaint and Review Board. According to Ortega, no stone will be left unturned and action will be taken swiftly, and anyone found in violation will be dealt with to the full extent of the law.
I don't know if the persons named in the investigating team are military. I don't know their names in military. I know they're police. We will have a military component because it has to do with the Defense Act, but we're not leading the investigation. If you note, the press release says, I believe it's Ms. Ramklam that's heading the investigation. So,
are you aware if any military officer has previously been charged with a sexual harassment charge?
Not to my recollection.
But are you aware that there have been rumblings, and these are rumblings that have existed within the community, that there is this culture within the military of officers who are primarily male acting in this untoward manner toward female officers, and in this case recruits?
How do you answer that? I believe we can all make an accusation against someone. But at the end of the day, you have to come forward with your written report, because you can say that she said, he said. But if that person doesn't come forward and make a formal report, then we can't do an investigation on rumors. No commander will feel good to have negative reports coming out of him. But I believe at the end of the day, we're here to fix problems that exist, and there's only one way to fix it. If we investigate it and put proper measures in place to ensure it doesn't happen again.
What's the time frame in terms of the investigation?
I'm not sure. I haven't spoken to the investigators yet in terms of them giving me a timeline. We've been very busy with getting this day on the way.
The Belize Coast Guard made a fisheries bust of marine products valued at $40,000. The Coast Guard was carrying out an operation near the Manatee Bar mouth earlier today when they discovered 3 fishermen operating with expired fisherfolk license. The fishermen were found with 9 drums and several coolers filled with marine products, including shark meat and other finfish. The products amounted to $40,000 in value. They also had an assortment of nets, 3 of which were longer than 1,000 feet and exceeded the legal limit. The Coast Guard says that one of the men is a Belizean, while the other 2 are Guatemalans with naturalization documents. They are expected to be charged by the relevant authorities in the coming days. The prosecution and defense counsels in the murder trial of 26-year-old Louis Carter wrapped up their closing arguments today before Supreme Court Justice Colin Young, and Carter's fate will be known on February 13th. Carter is accused of the shooting murder of mechanic 30-year-old Dwayne Hyde on July 30th, 2016 in Hyde's yard in the Escalante subdivision of San Pedro town. Carter gave an unsworn statement from the dock in court today and said that on the day of the incident, shortly after midnight on July 13, 2016, he was in Hyde's yard and saw Hyde pull out a gun and point it at him. Fearing for his life, Carter said he ran when the man stepped towards him, but the man caught up to him and they soon started to struggle for the gun, which discharged, shooting Hyde in the abdomen. During the struggle, Hyde, who was also reportedly had a screwdriver on him, inflicted wounds to Carter's neck, mouth, and abdomen. The official report, however, is that Carter went to Hyde's yard to settle a dispute, and the 2 got into an argument, then a fight, which resulted in the shooting and stabbing. Hyde died 2 weeks later from the injury. The defense represented senior counsel Simeon Sampson called no witnesses to testify on Carter's behalf in the trial without a jury. The case was presented by Crown Counsel Shanice Lovell. The court denied a number of bail applications today. A Belize City man charged with unlawful sexual intercourse and incest upon a year-old relative was denied bail today when he appeared before Justice Marilyn Williams to seek his freedom before the trial. But Justice Williams denied Leroy Roberto his request. The incident for which he's charged allegedly happened in April of 2019. It is alleged that Roberto committed the offense on 2 separate occasions upon the little girl. He is accused of entering the home of food vendor Elvia Cal at her Rio Grande Crescent home off Barbers Road Extension in Belize City and stabbing Cal and her helper Maria Pinto on their arms and shoulders. They knocked a gun out of his hand and fought back on the afternoon of November 15, 2019. Cal had told the media soon after the incident that the intruder demanded money and pulled a gun on them as they were offloading their pots and from a pickup truck to take into the house after the day's sales. But when the women, with the help of a relative, fought back with a machete and disarmed Arnold of the gun, he allegedly pulled a knife from off the kitchen table and stabbed the woman before running off with a bag containing the money from the food sales. Police managed to apprehend Arnold last week and subsequently charged him with aggravated burglary and wounding. He appeared this morning before Supreme Court Justice Marilyn Williams, seeking bail after it was denied at the magistrate court level last week. But his luck was not much better today because his bail application was denied again. Arnold's attorney, Ronnie Gonzalez, tried to convince the court that the accused is not a flight risk because he is a Belizean and that he was moved away from the immediate area where he resided, not far from Cal's home. He argued that Cal is innocent until proven guilty and that his freedom is not a privilege but a right. But Justice Williams denied the application on grounds that Arnold has been positively identified by the victims, the gravity of the assault, and that the victims are also entitled to their right to safety. She considered the hour of the home invasion broad daylight and said that it is an offense that can be committed again. The judge set a date for July 31st for the case against Arnold to commence and said that he can apply at another time before the trial for bail if he so wishes. After the attack, police recovered a .22 revolver, which they said was the weapon used to accost the women, along with the attacker used to stab them, and the machete that Cal's relative used to ward off the thief. Sherman Rodney was not lucky in his attempt to get Supreme Court bail today, while he awaits his murder trial for the incident that occurred in 2013. Rodney, who is 29 years old, will stand trial for the April 16, 2013 murder of Lloyd Augustus. Police allege that Rodney put a brutal beatdown on August, who was hospitalized but died of his injuries a few days later. There is growing concern by family and friends of Chris Gentle, who remains missing up to news time tonight. The Belizean fisherman of Cemetery Lane in Belize City was officially reported missing by his sister on January 30th. This is after he was last seen headed out to Austin Bogue Island on a route fishing trip with a man. But on January 29th, the man returned to Belize City saying that Gentle remained on the island fishing. The Belize Coast Guard has since been mobilized and a bulletin issued on the whereabouts of Gentle. Today, we spoke with his sister, who says that the family is concerned because he was to return to Belize City on Saturday, but Gentle cannot be located.
This is something that he recently started to do, as per to say, go to the island working with a man. He seems to like it out there. He comes home a couple of times and stated that he likes what he's doing. He's making a little ends for himself. So it was actually a good thing. Wednesday, the man that he went with actually came back in, and Chris did not come in, but we weren't really worried about it because then I spoke with him Monday. He said that he was going to be out there a little while and he was going to come in tomorrow, which is Saturday. Mm-hmm. So then we really didn't think anything about it until yesterday when they came and they told my sisters that he had went out somewhere, not really sure of the story, and he hadn't returned back as yet.
As in left from off the island?
Basically. So as opposed to the stories, we don't really know what to believe at this time. I mean, me and my sisters were trying to keep the faith, my brothers, my aunts, my cousins were trying to keep the faith, hoping that they would find him, because then he's not a bad person. And it's so shocking because he actually just started to do this job probably about a month. And then 1 month in, and me being very concerned about the seating, I even asked him one night, I said, do you guys go anywhere close to Maki where those people came up missing? He was like, no, we're not out of that area. So I was actually feeling a little bit comfortable about the situation, because then he was not close to that area. But then again, I guess I should have thought about it as the sea on a whole, pirates, whatever. I mean, I'm not really, like I said.
Just have you guys worried, basically.
Yes,
like
it does.
Anyone with information on Gentle's whereabouts is asked to call 911 or 922. After the break, a damning audit at Excelsior High School finds that a former principal misappropriated school funds. An audit of the Excelsior High School speaks poorly of the state of affairs at the high school. At the conclusion of an investigation, it was determined that a former principal is guilty of misappropriation and theft of school funds in the period June 1st, 2017 to September 30th, 2018. Here's News 5's Hipólito Novello with a report.
An audit commissioned by the Ministry of Education states that Excelsior High School is in a very grave state and that it is a school that has fallen through the cracks and such is open to such abuse as what transpired. And what has transpired is what the ad hoc investigative committee found, the misappropriation and theft of some $200,000. The audit covers the period June 1st, 2017 to September 30th, 2018. The allegations were made against then Principal Dan Waters, who on February 7, 2019 was placed on administrative leave while a committee was appointed and began reviewing the audit's findings. On March 13, 2019, the board laid 2 charges against Waters: misappropriation and theft of school funds, and bringing the teaching profession into disrepute. A tribunal was convened to the matter. The school presented its evidence, and Waters, through her attorney, was allowed to respond. The hearing began on March 28, 2019. Despite preliminary objections by Waters' attorney, Aja Matura, the hearing proceeded with a second session on April 1st. On that date, Waters advised the committee that Matura would no longer be representing her and that she needed time to find representation. The hearing continued on April 3rd, and Attorney Darrell Bradley joined Waters. During the hearing, Auditor George Swift revealed that he found that checks amounting to an excess of $39,000, which were written out and not cash, as it would result in an actual overdraft of the school's account. The audit revealed that Social Security and income tax were withheld from the salaries of teachers, but not paid to the respective institutions. One of the witnesses was former Vice President, the now deceased Alaris Andruin. According to Andruin, she did not know about the irregularities with Social Security and income tax or insurance until it was brought to her attention on more than one occasion by her colleagues. She said she inquired with Ms. Waters, who assured her that the monies would be paid. According to Waters, it was determined at the BAPS meeting that they would try to convince the ministry to return monies cut from schools that would then be used to pay Social Security and income tax. That plan failed. The principal reportedly entered into unauthorized contracts. Then there's a case of 25 checks totaling over $65,000, which were paid in her name. The checks were cashed, but there's no proof as to what the monies were used for, and so the auditor concludes that the monies were not used for the purposes stated in the vouchers. For example, according to the report, a check for $5,000 was made out to Dan Waters for roof works. However, there are no receipts to prove that the works were done. Waters said that while she took some photographs of the receipts, she did not take many, as she feared being accused of falsifying invoices. Waters agreed that she decided to withhold the payment and use the funds for other purposes without the authority. Waters admitted that she made unlawful decisions. At the end of the hearing, Waters was found guilty of a misappropriation and theft of school funds on several instances and bringing the teacher profession into disrepute. As punishment, the committee recommended Waters to be demoted and that Waters should receive half her salary for 6 weeks. The report also found that Excelsior High School has been neglected by the ministry and the board, and as such, children have suffered. Reporting for News 5, Hipólito Novello.
Jumoke Castro is back to work at the Belize Tax Services after disciplinary action was taken against him following a vile and tasteless social media post made against the wife of Plus TV's Louis Wade. The Facebook post came on the heels of a domestic violence incident in which the son of Minister Godwin Hulse was charged for common assault against the mother of his child. In responding to an online comment, Castro raised the ire of many and landed himself in hot water. While the Public Service Union has come to his defense, Financial Secretary Joseph Waite says the matter will be taken to the Public Service Commission.
That seems to be his defense. He said that's his explanation. It wasn't under his signature. The Public Service Union says they were acting on his behalf as a member of the union. We will take that on board, but I think we are proceeding to take the claim to the Public Services Commission. He will have an opportunity to explain himself, to defend himself, bring a lawyer, if he so chooses, but it's not done. I mean, it's going to go forward.
So as it stands, he remains suspended?
No, he's reported back to work.
There is a new issue that is bubbling. The Public Service Union is at loggerheads with the Ministry of Finance following the amalgamation of the Belize Tax Services Department. In a release issued by the PSU dated today, January 31st, the union states that it has reached an impasse with the ministry in resolving several issues of concern, including a request by the union for a permanent seat on the Project Steering Committee to ensure transparency and accountability, as well as to safeguard the best interests of public officers in the amalgamated departments. The union has now registered its impasse with the Labor Commissioner by declaring a trade dispute. Meetings will be held countrywide with union branches to determine the course of intended industrial action. We asked FinSec Waite for a comment this morning.
Well, change is always difficult. I mean, and I imagine there's some people who may have had expectations that have not materialized, but there has been no complaint or no grievance filed by anyone so far. and we are waiting to see the nature of it. I mean, we're hearing things about disgruntlement and perhaps disrespect, according to the union, but we want to see the concrete what is, so we can try to address it. Every member of staff is valuable, and we try to address their concerns, but bring the concrete, you know. And we prefer to deal with this, not in the public, in the press, but across the table, face to face, to see what we can do to resolve any issues that may be. But we really need some clarity.
You will correct me if I'm wrong. However, I've been made to understand that certain concerns were brought to your attention prior to the amalgamation, and the response was that you were dismissive of these concerns being brought to your attention.
I wouldn't characterize anything I do as dismissive, but it's their view, and we try to address it. But the thing is, are the expectations realistic? We went to great pains to explain what the amalgamation was about. There was country tours by management to each office, both offices at the time, to explain them. I think we went to great lengths. Now, if that's not sufficient, come back and please, and because we're prepared to listen.
When we come back, the Secretary General of the OAS visits with the Prime Minister. The Secretary General of the OAS, Luis Almagro, today met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Wilfred Sede Elrington, as well as with the Prime Minister, Dean Barrow. Soon after his inauguration, Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei asked the OAS to facilitate a meeting with PM Barrow either in Belmopan or at the adjacency zone at the end of this month. Clearly, it has not happened, and a release today makes no mention of the proposed meeting. Prime Minister Barrow, however, spoke on the implementation of the confidence-building measures along the adjacency zone, where there have been sporadic flare-ups. Both sides agreed on the need to continue the full implementation of the CBMs as part of the efforts to promote better relations between Belize and Guatemala. There were also discussions on the work of the OAS at the adjacency zone, primarily in the areas of promoting a culture of peace and conducting verifications. Today, an official celebration of the 61st anniversary of the Cuban Revolution, as well as the 25th anniversary of bilateral relations between Belize and Cuba, will be celebrated at the Museum of Belize. The ceremony, which began around 7 o'clock tonight, will also launch an exhibit on the gallery. The event is being organized through the Cuban Embassy and the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Today, the director of the Museum of Belize, Alexis Salazar, says that the event is threefold.
If you recall, last year we signed a MOU with the Embassy of Cuba to do cultural exchanges and so on. So this is a part of that MOU. Secondly, it's the in Corozal, and we brought in a Cuban artist, Alejandro Falco, and he did training in Corozal with young graphic artists and so on. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing, of course, is the exhibit that we have, the diplomatic relations between Cuba and Belize. So it's a celebration of the 25-year anniversary of Cuba and Belize having bilateral relations, the 61st anniversary of the Cuban Revolution, and of course the MOU that we have with the Cuban Embassy.
Coming up after the break, new soldiers joined the ranks of the BDF, but Minister of National Security was not at Price Barracks.
The Belize Bank introduces
The ranks of the Belize Defense Force grew by 101 soldiers today. After undergoing rigorous training, the young men and women donned their uniforms this afternoon as they officially became members of the BDF. The event was held at Price Barracks in Ladyville, and it is traditional for the Minister of National Security to deliver the main address. But this time, John Saldivar missed the occasion. News 5's Hipólito Novello was there and has the following report.
101 disciplined young men and women today joined the Belize Defense Force as they proudly stood at attention in their uniforms. 14 of the graduates are female.
I know how this moment feels like when you're out there in the square and coming off. And now being the general commanding the force, I also feel that same excitement that I did so many years ago, because I know how they're feeling right now to finally graduate and basically become shoulder to shoulder with the other guys who have been doing this job for so many years. So I'm quite sure it's a great feeling for them.
Intake number 65 endured weeks of mental and physical training. They are now battle ready to defend Belize, even though a few of them fainted, giving in to the scorching sun and what Brigadier General Stephen Ortega described as the excitement for the day.
They tense up. I mean, if you stay relaxed, you can withstand most of this. But I guess the crowd and everything and the hype of graduation, I know when you graduated, you get that extra hype, and it's just too much adrenaline. Because if you notice, most of them, after a while, they picked them up, they walked off because they've died down, so the adrenaline has eased off, so they're all right.
The achievements of several of the newly installed soldiers were highlighted during the passing out ceremony today at the Sir Corvey Young Parade Square in Price Barracks in Ladyville. Recruit Carlton Kingston was recognized for best shot, while recruits Clint Stevenson and Augustine Aqua were recognized for champion field craft and champion physical training respectively. This year, champion female is recruit Ajani Carr, and the champion male is recruit Shane Kyle Ciego. Absent for today's event was Minister of National Security John Saldivar, who was represented by Anthony Martinez.
The BDF recruit training is designed to make you tougher, but both mentally and physically, and only the strongest survive. It involves physical training, practical and theoretical courses extending well into the night. Today's graduation indicates they have all displayed satisfactory proficiency in foot drills, skills and arms, first aid, map reading, navigation, military communication, the law of armed conflict, tactics, both conventional and non-conventional, jungle warfare and internal security. These new soldiers will bring added reinforcement to the BDF and allow the force to be better out of its mandate to defend the territorial integrity of Belize.
Reporting for News 5, Hipólito Novello.
And that's the news. Don't forget that tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/News5Live. I'm Jamie Rock. Thanks for joining us, and from all of us here at News 5, good night.